Let the one who has two shoes sell one and buy a sword, and the one who has two trousers should sell one and buy a sword. Because now it is time for revolution, and this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is all in the mind, because if your mind has not been transformed, nothing you can do with your hands will be meaningful or impactful to change your reality. Uh, peace, peace and power to all African family from wherever you find yourself. This is Kabbalah here from the African Continental Unity Party. We salute you today in our weekly conversation where we discuss certain things that are important for our survival as African people. The aim of this weekly conversation is not always about teaching, because I believe we are living in this generation that does not require much of teaching, but it requires that we should actually make people think. There's a difference between teaching and making people think. When you teach people, you are using a banking style whereby you consider people as empty vessels in which you have to deposit some contents that fit your perception of life and reality, and you want to transform those people into containers of your knowledge and understanding, which might be good, which is also not good in some aspects. However, within the SCUP, we believe that the most important thing is not just about teaching people, but it's about to make people think. Because if you are able to make people think, you have actually managed to affect their lives in a profound way that you cannot imagine. Because anything that people do in life is a product of their thinking. Anything that is done in this world is a product of mind. So in most cases, the difference between those who become successful in life and those who are less successful or unsuccessful is based on how we engage our mental faculties, how we are engaging our minds and thinking about situations that are affecting us. Because every problem in life is solved through the process of questions and answers. And question and answer is an exercise of mind. You need to think so that you can ask a question. And when you ask a question, you actually put your mind in a certain motion so that it can browse and bring results or responses that you are willing to get from the infinity of wisdom in this universe. So thinking is much important than being taught what to do. Because when you are learning, your mind is in a passive motion. But when you think, your mind is in active motion, where you inquire from the universe what are the solutions to all these many problems that we are facing or we are confronted with as African people. So we don't aim actually to teach people, but we put some reality there, questions even, just to make ourselves think a bit. Because when we begin to think, we will be able then to change our situation. We'll be able to realize that what we are today is not what we have, destined to be. And therefore, there's a need for us to begin looking in a different ways and approaching things in different manners so that we can see a different result. Once again, peace and power to all of you as you are joining us. And I will plead with you, please like this video and share with it. It's one of the ways you can contribute in the awakening that we want to spread across the continent. We want our people to wake up from the sleeping pills of Western thinkings and Western knowledge or notions of life, so that we can embrace Ubuntu or Afrocentric ways of life and ways of thinking. So it is good for you to to support this vision by, for example, liking the video and sharing it, so that many people can come to can get in touch with what we do, the thinking contents that we are producing to make our people aware of the reality and awaken from the sleeping pills of Western philosophy and Western notions, as I've just said it. So today, briefly, we are discussing about globalization, and not just globalization, particularly the post-American globalization or globalized world. Because whether you like it or not, America is a falling empire. It is falling right now, in our eyes, because it is the nature of things in the world. Every system, every organization, or every idea emerges, develops, and dies so that it can give a space to a new ways of thinking, to a new organization, or to a new system that people will embrace for the future. So you can compare a nation to any living thing, such as tree, such as human beings, such as animals. We all have lifespan. So it means we get born, we evolve, and then we die. So does nations as well. America is not the first superpower country in the world. We had Roman Empire, we had Greek Empire, we had the Kemets, we had a lot of civilizations that were flourishing in the past, and that came to a point where they had to die in order to leave space to other civilizations as well. So that was America. That is why I'm talking about post-American globalized world. Post-American globalized world means a world that is globalized but without American influence, without American hegemony as it is now and as it was yesterday before the end of the Second World War. So that is the era in which we are, going now. And it's not going to be done easily, because remember, if you have embraced the reality and you have managed all the institutions of power and control in a way that you are controlling the rest of humanity, it's not going to be easier for you to be overthrown from your position. So it might happen either through a violent warfare in the world, for America to actually to be replaced as a global superpower, or it might happen as well in other ways, in other strategic way, politically, that we don't understand at the moment. Because indeed, when we talk about warfare and politics, it's the same thing. The difference is just that a warfare is a politics with bloodshed, same as politics is warfare without bloodshed. So American empire is falling now, is in ruins as we're speaking right now. And that decadence starts from the civilization itself, from the moral of American as a people. And when you look at America, it's a real Babylon as we're speaking right now, because there is a real decadence of morality, of civic values, and all kind of values that make a society as a society of human beings. The most important thing in America right now is money. The most interesting thing to all the people in America now is money. That is why they can drop bombs in foreign cities. They can drop bombs on hospitals to kill people in order to to attend only one so-called terrorist. They can drop bombs on a bus with kids in order to kill one so-called terrorist. All of this is because of money, because they want to avoid challenges. They don't want to be challenged in their position of the world superpower, mostly economically speaking as well as militarily speaking. So we are heading toward that world now. The question is, where does Africa positions herself in this globalized world that is actually rid of America, ridden of America imperialism or America hegemony? Now, for us to understand this, we need to look in the history to even come to realize why we talk about globalization today. But before we look in the history, one thing we need to understand is this. Every group of people in this world are aiming for one thing, or is aiming for one thing, which is to control the world and its resources. Every group of people in this world, where they talk about the Chinese, where they talk about the Indians, where they talk about the Westerns, the Europeans, where they talk about the Japanese, all of them, or even the Arabs, maybe except Africans, because in most cases we have different dreams. We don't mostly happen to live in a reality. That is why we want to awaken the minds of our people so that we can live facing the reality as it is, and then approaching it in that way. So every group of people in this world seeks for one thing, which is the global domination, to dominate the world and its resources. So now when you talk about globalization, it shouldn't confuse any one of us. It only means to bring the world and its resources together and control it. So the question is, who is supposed to control it in this 21st century, as America and its hegemony is being challenged now? Because for some times, America controlled the world and its resources. It's a matter of fact that you find American military bases in almost all the continents. American presence is in the sea. American presence is in the sky. American presence is in all the 5 or 6 continents that we have in the world today. So, and American understanding of world, of life and everything has been shaping the world understanding of politics and economy. That's why I'm saying they've been waging war in the name of that. If you are not aligning with American ways of understanding economy, understanding politics, you are out very, very quickly. Either by military actions or by, I don't know, by sanctions or by just isolation. So they have been in the control of the world politics. They have been in control of the world diplomacy and the world economy. Now we have different poles. Now you have China rising, you have Russia resisting or challenging the imperialism, the American imperialism, and you have India also trying to rise its head now, above the paradigm imposed to all nations, and eventually this is a kind of ongoing war that is not going to stop now. That will go on until America has lost all its allies, and eventually America has gone down as a post or a post-imperial power, so to say. So now the question is, how does African people position themselves in this new global world? Because whether it is America or China or other so-called superpower that is in the control of global politics and global economy, if you as African people, you are still powerless and you are still not in charge of your own life, you are going to be dominated. And domination, whether it comes from God or whether it comes from devil, whether it comes from whoever, domination will always give birth to one thing, and that is oppression. Domination always results in the oppression. When people are dominated, they cannot fully function as human beings, and they cannot actually function with all their human faculties and do whatever they have been destined to do, and therefore the result of that domination will be oppression of those people. So therefore domination is not a good thing to be living under. So we cannot get rid of one master in order to run for another. If America goes down, the question is, what or who is going to be in charge of the world paradigm? Is it China? Is it Russia? Or is India? Or are we going to be in charge of our lives ourselves? But let me tell you, through what is called globalization, what is going to be, or what is actually getting in charge of our lives today, is neither America, China, or India, but it is enterprises, private enterprises, or what we can call multilateral or multinational corporations. These are the ones who are becoming the new masters of the world today. So we have to ask a question as well. Should we leave enterprises privately managed in charge of our lives, or should we redesign things so that we can be again in charge of our lives and decide what is to happen with whatever that is produced in our nations, and how it is going to be distributed, and what is going to be done with the profits? These are the very important questions that we need to ask ourselves, especially as African people. And by asking questions, we are opening our minds, and we'll get to the point where we begin to act differently to change our reality. As I said from the beginning, that the most important thing is not to teach people, but the most important thing is actually to make people think. When people think for themselves, they will answer to some of the toughest questions that they have in their lives. So now, when you look in the past, actually starting from the 1949, with the declaration of the president of American President Truman, that is when most of philosophies or ideologies that have governed the post-world Second World War world actually. And since that time, we have had a lot of recipes or models for development, because that is actually according to different theories. That is the time 1949. That is the time where development theories emerged with the Truman speech on development. So the first recipe that was given to us was development should be modernization. And remember, just at that time, Africa was not yet so-called independence. So it was kind of preparing what was going to happen in the African post-colonial. It means they had already planned what they had to do with you. And as a matter of fact, America, at the end of the Second World War, America told France and Britain, who had more colonies in the world, that America, as victorious of the Second World War, had to have also a kind of share in whatever France and Germany were possessing in terms of colonies. So in that context, they had to prepare already a terrain for what was going to be Africa, or African post-colonialism. So there was already philosophies of development drafted, and the first one was modernization. Now, what is modernization implying? It's simply, in the context of Africa, it is that all African nations had to follow the guidelines of America and European nations so that they can become developed. Sorry. In other words, we had to abandon our culture, our traditions, our ways of lives. We had to forsake our languages, our names, and adopt everything European so that we can see conditions of development, obviously establishing themselves in Africa. And for that reason, or for that sake, we had African head of states put in place who were educated in that philosophy. They had to push education that turned us into little British, little French, and little Portuguese, according to who colonized you, because we wanted to be modernized as opposite to the African culture that is backwards, you see. And we went through the modernization philosophy or ideology, but we haven't seen the fruits of development that we wanted to see in Africa with modernization. And after modernization, there came another idea of development that was called economic development and industrialization. And economic development or industrialization was aiming to transform Africa by building infrastructures and industries that now can actually bring the development that we wanted in the continent. And for that to happen, what was going to be done was that these Western nations, through their own institutions such as the World Bank for Reconstruction, commonly known today as the World Bank, and the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, all of these two, plus the World Trade Organization, three of them are called institutions of the Bretton Woods. They were actually created in America, in Bretton Woods. That's why I say that the world paradigm since the Second World War has been shaped mainly by American thinking and American philosophy. So now we embarked in the industrialization and economic development. And the aim was to actually make Africa similar to Europe, to France, with the same level of infrastructures and development and stuff like that. But for that to happen, there was now a guidelines which was African nations had to go to the World Bank and IMF to borrow enormous amount of money to implement whatever uh, agenda of development was in order to bring infrastructures, in order to modernize, right, or to actually create economic development. But but the money that you borrowed in US dollars, you have to pay it back in US dollars. That was the condition. So it means African nations had to borrow money in US currency, which is the dollars, and had to repay back the money in the US currency. But the point is, African nations don't print US dollars, US bills. We don't print this money. And we borrowed this money to go back to Europe to buy engineers or to hire engineers, to hire companies that were coming to build the roads for us, to pay for those engineers to build roads for us, to hire teachers to come and then build schools for us and then teach us Western thinking and Western philosophies. So in other words, the money that we borrowed from the World Banks, from the World Bank and from the IMF, that money returned back to Europe in order to pay the European enterprises that were coming to Africa to build, I don't know, roads, buildings, and bridges and stuff like that that we needed because we were following the ideology of industrialization that European advocated for us to follow in order for us to become developed. So the question was, how are we going to pay the same money with plus interest, because we have already spent that money by paying back to the same European who pretended to borrow the money to us so that they can come and advise us, give us advices regarding to the African development and build the roads, build the bridge and stuff like that. And the good portion of that money as well went back to Europe or to Switzerland in their banks, because some head of states in Africa had to take a portion of that money to go and store it in the Western banks because they had to steal it, in fact, and they were encouraged to steal it because there was no need for Africa to be able to pay back the money. So now we have two problems here. One is the money is lost through corruption. The second thing is the money that supposedly came to Africa went back to them, the same lenders. And now we found ourselves obliged to pay back the money in the US currency that we don't print. And we had only one possibility to make sure that we can pay that money. And that possibility was to produce more the products that the world market needed, in order to generate more money in the US dollars so that we can be able to pay back the money. And that is how Africa found herself in the circle, or in the, how can I put it, in the destructive motion, or in Asia where we are today. The money could not be paid because Africa does not produce much that she can sell in the global market so that she can pay back the loans, right? And as a matter of fact, what did Thomas Sankara said? Captain Sankara, what did he say? He said that Africa, we produce what we don't consume, and we consume what we don't produce. Let me repeat that again. We produce what we don't consume, and we consume what we don't produce. It means in Africa, we import more than we export, in order to generate money. And the money that we are using actually to import whatever that we need is the money that we took from credit. Who is the foolish person who can take a loan that has to be paid plus interest, but use that loan to buy food, to buy clothes, to buy cars, and to buy house, but not to invest in order to generate the money so that he can pay back the loan? That was the problem. And you know where things got even more difficult is when in 1979 African nations gathered together and realized that things are going bad here. We don't have the means to invest in agriculture, to produce food for our people. We have the land, but African people are dying hungry and stuff like that. We should find a solution. You know what they did? They went in Nigeria at what is called Lagos Plan for Development. Lagos Plan of Development in Nigeria. They gathered there and they designed or they drafted a plan for development. That plan had more emphasis in the agriculture so that we as a continent we can invest more in the agriculture so that we can produce the food and stuff that we need in Africa. But because it's annoying to see that Africa as it is, we import even the matches that we use. You know, overseas we import even the toothpaste. Overseas we import shoes, we import sugar, we import everything. You know, so we take the little money that we have in Africa to go and buy those things, and when we eat and finish, what else? We go and borrow another money. So this head of states came to Nigeria to discuss how we can develop Africa. They came up with a very important and wonderful plan for development. But you know, 1 year after that, in 1980, what America did, from what is called Washington Consensus, American people and the Western, all of them, they went together and they drafted what was then called structural adjustment programs. The structural adjustment programs were added now or became the conditions under which a country from the South or from Africa could borrow money from the World Bank or from the IMF. And these structural conditions in simple terms meant that if you borrow money, you cannot invest that money, for example, in the education of your people, because education must be profitable sector of the economy. It means the education must be left to private entrepreneurs to come and invest for their own profit making. The governments were not allowed to invest that money in the healthcare sector. Why? Because healthcare sector should be left to private entrepreneurs to come build hospitals to make money over that. So in other words, health care is no longer about taking care of the people, it's no longer about serving lives, it's about making money. Third thing, the governments were not allowed to invest the money, for example, in agriculture. Agriculture had to be left to companies such as Monsanto's and other companies owned by the Western so that they can come and make profits in Africa. And fourth thing, African nations were not supposed to subsidize the local entrepreneurs. It means if you have in Africa, you have local citizens, local Africans who are entrepreneurs, who have small businesses, and the government wants to, subsidize them. It means to give them some incentives so that the business can grow, can employ many people, and can produce more products that is needed. That government is not allowed to do that because the multinational corporations who have industrial capacity of production should come and invest and kick out of the market local producers. These are some of the conditions that you found or that you can find in the adjustment programs, structural adjustment programs, and other conditions such as deregulating the market means you don't have to impose a lot of tax. You have to open the market for foreign investors to come in, and you don't have to you have to actually to devaluate your currency. There are a lot of nonsensical conditions that come with structural adjustment programs, and all this, bunch of conditions put African states in a awkward situation where we are today, and where we are still trying to survive or to recover. Many of you as African citizens, you are literally today paying a debt or credit that you have never have knowledge of, that you didn't take and that you didn't use, because some coons in power took the money and took a good portion of it, to share among themselves in their dynasty of rulers in Africa, and then invest some of the money, not even invest, stored some of the money in the banks in Switzerland, and then the poor population must pay with their bloods. This is the situation we find ourselves today, and this was in 1980, and that was actually the starting point of globalization being championed by neoliberalism as idea. Everything that I've just explained as a condition of the structural adjustment programs is what we call neoliberal philosophy or neoliberal economy, whereby the government is is more and more reduced in its impact and its involvement of the nation management, and private enterprises are the ones now dictating the law of the markets, dictating what is the price we have to put on the commodities or on the goods produced, and how do we distribute the profits. These are the decisions that have to be left to private entrepreneurs and private enterprises, and the government must stay away from this. And this is actually the nature of the current globalization as we have it today. So in other words, globalization as we have it today is another philosophy of development. As I said, from 1949 or 1950s, we were told that we need to be modernized so that we can actually embark in the development that we needed as African people. And because modernization failed to produce the results that we expected, industrialization was brought to African so that we can embrace it and become like European nations. And industrialization made us more vulnerable and destroyed African completely, so to say, in a way that it put us in the conditions of indebted nations. And then followed from the industrialization and economic development, it came another period of what you call basic needs, which is not really important anyway. But the most important thing that came after industrialization is neoliberal era in which we are living today, and which is actually globalization. So the question is, where do we position ourselves today? Are we going to continue to follow the Western in his philosophy and understanding of the world and become part of the globalized world today, even though it is almost difficult to resist the force of globalization, as technology is bringing people together, is drawing people together and making things more easier than it was before, and making the world to move faster than it was before, increasing the capacity of production as it was before. But the question is, who is in charge of this globalized world? Are we in charge of ourselves, or are we being taken charge of by other people who are not even government but now private enterprises? Because one thing that you need to understand, even though it says that globalization brings people together, what you need to realize that people are not really just together as we may assume, and we don't have that freedom to move from one point to another point because we are in the globalized world. Because what is confusing some African people is the propaganda that we find in the Western media, and we begin to think that globalization is doing good to us because it's giving us the facility to move across the world, to settle in whatever country we want to go and do business in a way that we want to go, which is not true, because when you look at America, they are all having protectionist measures when it comes to immigration. They don't want people from the Middle East, people from Africa to go to immigrate easily to America and settle there. It is the same thing in Europe, right? So the only freedom that the globalization has brought is a freedom for multinational corporations to settle wherever they want to go, where they can exploit cheap labor to go there and do business and make more profits. It's not the freedom of you and I as an individual to move freely across the world and to settle wherever we want to settle. It's more of enterprises, multinational enterprises, to move freely, to go to settle in Africa, in Ethiopia, to make women working there 12 hours and poorly being paid in order to produce luxurious clothes that are going to be sold in New York, in Paris, and in Louis Vuitton's boutiques and stuff like that. There is all cheaper exploitation of cheaper labor and stuff like that. So uh, globalization gives more power to enterprise to do business, to move freely, and to be in charge of our nations than giving the nations or the states the power to manage their affairs and to develop the economies. So, are we going to let ourselves be in charge of these institutions that are privately governed, that are no democratic? Because enterprises, they are not democratic. They don't have democracy within themselves. All the decisions that are taken within an enterprise are taken in autocratic manner because enterprise are privately owned. So where are we finding ourselves as African people? This is the question that I'm bringing to some of us who are still much in love of globalization that is being championed by neoliberalist ideas of the Western civilization. If we have to go into globalization, we need to go with Ubuntu mentality as African people, but not with the instruction or the way that America, the way that Germany, the way that England sees globalization. We should go with the way that we see globalization. And it should be structured on the Ubuntu philosophy as African people. That is the bottom line of this presentation, and it's aiming to just make you understand where we are coming from and where we are today. Where we're coming from, we have been always following the recipes of development given by the West or by the Westerners, and these recipes for development were not tailored, were not structured on tackling the real problems that we are facing in Africa or in the global South. They were structured on the understanding or on the vision of Europe itself, which is the vision to conquer the world and its resources. That's why I said from the beginning that every group of people in this world pursue one thing, which is to conquer the world and its resources so that it can maintain itself in the position of global superpower. Then what is the aim for Africa if it's not for power? What can we do in this situation if we are powerless? That is why, once again, and as always, I introduce to you the African Continental Unity Party, which is a new political party that transcends boundaries now. We are not limiting ourselves on the boundaries that were drawn for us by our oppressors. We are redefining ourselves as African people now, because for those who want to become powerful, they must begin first by redefining themselves, by understanding who really they are, not according to what other people see about them, but according to what they say and they see about themselves. And this is what we have to say to about ourselves today, and we say it to the whole world. We are African people. Therefore, we are coming all together under one umbrella of the ACUP, the African Continental Unity Party, which is a party that is transcending the boundaries imposed onto us by European people. And our vision is to create Africa as a global power base, because power is the essence of life. If we don't have the power, we cannot resist the Western globalization that is being imposed onto all of us. If we don't have the power, we cannot survive in the world that is post-America, in the globalized post-American world. Because whoever who will take charge, who will take over from America, might be even more detrimental and more destructive than America itself as it was. And I'm looking at China. Do you think Chinese people are passive people? Not at all. Look how aggressive they are in in the investment. Look how aggressive they are when they come into our cities, when they come into our communities. They come there, they will find some, five individuals having shops in our communities. One is selling breads there, one is selling, I don't know, fish there, one is selling tomatoes, one is selling this and that. And they come as a conglomerate of all of them, come with huge money and open a big shop in that community and beat the price, right? Maybe by half. And all of us now, we're running to them to buy the cheaper stuff that have been manufactured out of chemical process. For example, when I go there and buy rice that has been manufactured out of plastic, not organic rice, right? If you don't know, when you're buying rice from Chinese, you might have been eating plastic without knowing it. So we're going there for a cheaper price that we're paying for the product and putting our own people out of market because they cannot compete anymore. And after these people have gone out of the market, now the Chinese or the Arabs or the what you call the Bangladeshis or people from Bangladeshi who are in our communities with the shops, after they've pushed all our local entrepreneurs out of the market, they now rise the price more, even higher even than what previously we were buying from our own people. So you can see that level of aggressiveness, and the question is, should we leave them to be in charge of our lives, or do we hope that they can save us, even if they manage uh, to downplay America as an empire? That is not the good way. The good way for us to go is to aim for power, because it's only the power that will protect us against destruction from other people. Is the power that will rebuild Africa. It's not modernization. It's not about forsaking our cultures, our traditions, our names, our languages to adopt French, English, and whatever else that we can see development. No, we will be able to develop once we emerge in the dimension of power, because power is central to every people on in life, and every people on the face of the earth. For as long as we are powerless people, we are going to be remaining under the domination of other people, and domination, as I've said, it will always give birth to oppression. So join the African Continental Unity Party, the ACUP, and become an active member of the ACUP. Get involved in the politics of your future and of your liberation. And please support us in what we do. This work cannot go further if you don't support us. As I've explained, the vision is to make Africa as the global power base. And how do we resist the globalization, or the Western globalization, or the Chinese globalization? Is by coming together under an umbrella of African Continental Unity Party as African people, under one structure, political structure, economic structure, but most importantly, military structure that can help us and allow us to defend ourselves collectively, to act collectively, to decide collectively, and also to aggress our enemies collectively. Because Nigeria as a country cannot resist against Chinese imperialism, Russian imperialism, or American imperialism. Ghana itself, on its own, it cannot do nothing against this global imperialism, right? Togo, Guinea, South Africa, Congo, Senegal, all these individual countries who believe that they have a future, right? Future that they have been seeking for 60 years now, they haven't been able to find it. They believe that they can have it in the next 100 years, right? Or in the next 5 years when we elect a good leader. All these nations individually, they cannot stand against the imperial powers that we that are afflicting us in the world today. So the better way we can go about it is to create a collective front line that can help us to resist. That is why we're inviting you within the ACUP, because ACUP gives us the opportunity to draft some policies that will draw Africa in the one direction, or that will pull Africa towards the same direction. Because what is destructive to us even today is still the fact that we are still divisive in how we look at the world. Some of us want to develop as France has done because they were colonized by French. Some of others want to develop as as Britain has developed because they were colonized by Britain. So we are being pulled in different directions, and we cannot create a synergy in the continent so that we can resist collectively. So this is what ACUP gives us today. It gives us a voice, a collective voice to resist against imperialism. So if you haven't been able to join the African Continental Unity Party, please do that today. Go to our website www.africanacup.org. Join the party and become an active member, and let us rebuild Africa, right? If you haven't been able to, if you have known about ACUP already, please like this video and share it with your contacts so that they can get to know also this philosophy or this new movement that we've started, which is going to be spread all over the continent and in the diaspora, so that we as African people can come together and decide politically, decide economically, and decide militarily about what is the future of our children and our four children will be. And no more, those decisions will be no more taken in America, the Washington, the UN Assembly, because those institutions don't represent our interests and don't reflect our values. But we need to make those decisions ourselves. Thank you very much for giving me time to share with you the vision of African Continental Unity Party and our idea regarding this globalized post-American world. The most important thing, or the most important message that I have to emphasize and leave with you is that your job that you're doing now is a very good job. You need to keep it. Your religion, I don't know what it is good if it helps you. Your tradition, your tribe, your culture, your knowledge of history, your knowledge of, I don't know, economy, everything that has been helping you now, until now, is very necessary. But your life and my life will never change until we decisively and collectively embark in the politics of our liberation, or we will have to enjoy the politics of our oppression. Peace and power to you again, African family. If you have two shoes, it's time now that you need to sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, it is time that you need to sell one and buy a sword, because now it is about revolution. And this revolution is about the mind, not on streets, not about burning cars. It's all about the mind transformation. Because if African man has been transformed in his mind, we wouldn't be looking to the west or to the east for development. Development will start from here and will emerge here and will be translated in our communities, will be translated in our societies. If this has not been fully developed to look at the reality in a pragmatic ways and approach it in that way, nothing we can do with this will be meaningful to our lives. It might even turn out to become tools of our self-destruction. Thank you very much again for listening, and see you next time. Peace and power.